Welcome to Bite at a Time Books, where we read you your favorite classics one bite at a time. My name is Bree Carlile, and I love to read and wanted to share my passion with listeners like you. You can sign up for our newsletter at biteatatimebooks.com. You'll also find our new t-shirts in the shop, including podcast shirts and quote shirts from your favorite classic novels. Be sure to follow my show on your favorite podcast platform so you get all the new episodes. We're part of the Bite at a Time Books Productions Network. If you'd also like to hear what inspired your favorite classic author to write their novels, and what was going on in the world at the time, check out the Bite at a Time Books Behind the Story podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. Today we'll be continuing Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. Chapter 9. Marius produces on someone who is a judge of the matter the effect of being dead. He allowed Marius to slide down upon the shore. They were in the open air. The miasmas, darkness, horror lay behind him. The pure, healthful, living, joyous air that was easy to breathe inundated him. Everywhere around him reigned silence, but that charming silence when the sun is set in an unclouded azure sky. Twilight had descended. Night was drawing on. The great deliverer, the friend of all those who need a mantle of darkness that they may escape from an anguish. The sky presented itself in all directions like an enormous calm. The river flowed to his feet with the sound of a kiss. The aerial dialogue of the nests bidding each other good night in the elms of the Camp Elise was audible. A few stars, daintily piercing the pale blue of the zenith, invisible to reverie alone, formed imperceptible little splendors amid the immensity. Evening was unfolding over the head of Jean Valjean, all the sweetness of the infinite. It was that exquisite and undecided hour which says neither yes nor no. Night was already sufficiently advanced to render it possible to lose oneself at a little distance, and yet there was sufficient daylight to permit of recognition at close quarters. For several seconds, Jean Valjean was irresistibly overcome by that august and caressing serenity. Such moments of oblivion do come to men. Suffering refrains from harassing the unhappy wretch. Everything is eclipsed in the thoughts. Peace broods over the dreamer like night, and beneath the twilight which beams and an imitation of the sky which is illuminated, the soul becomes studded with stars. Jean Valjean could not refrain from contemplating that vast clear shadow which rested over him. Thoughtfully, he bathed in the sea of ecstasy and prayer in the majestic silence of the eternal heavens. Then he bent down swiftly to Marius, as though the sentiment of duty had returned to him, and dipping up water in the hollow of his hand, he gently sprinkled a few drops on the latter's face. Marius's eyelids did not open, but his half-open mouth still breathed. Jean Valjean was on the point of dipping his hand in the river once more, when all at once he experienced an indescribable embarrassment, such as a person feels when there is someone behind him whom he does not see. We've already alluded to this impression, with which everyone is familiar. He turned round. Someone was, in fact, behind him, as there had been a short while before. A man of lofty stature, enveloped in a long coat, with folded arms, and bearing in his right fist a bludgeon of which the leaden head was visible, stood a few paces in the rear of the spot where Jean Valjean was crouching over Marius. With the aid of the darkness, it seemed a sort of apparition. An ordinary man would have been alarmed because of the twilight. A thoughtful man on account of the bludgeon. Jean Valjean recognized Javert. The reader has divined, no doubt, that Thénardier's pursuer was no other than Javert. Javert, after his unlooked-for escape from the barricade, had betaken himself to the prefecture of police, had rendered a verbal account to the prefect in person in a brief audience, had then immediately gone on duty again, which implied, the note the reader will recollect, which had been captured on his person, a certain surveillance of the shore on the right bank of the Seine near the Camp Elise, which had, for some time past, aroused the attention of the police. There, he had caught sight of Thénardier and had followed him. The reader knows the rest.
Thus, it will be easily understood that that greeting, so obligingly opened to Jean Valjean, was a bit of cleverness on Thénardier's part. Thénardier intuitively felt that Javert was still there. The man spied upon has a scent which never deceives him. It was necessary to fling a bone to that sleuth-hound. An assassin. What a godsend. Such an opportunity must never be allowed to slip. Thénardier, by putting Jean Valjean outside in his stead, provided a prey for the police, forced them to relinquish his scent, made them forget him in a bigger adventure, repaid Javert for his waiting, which always flatters a spy, earned 30 francs, and counted with certainty, so far as he himself was concerned, on escaping with the aid of this diversion. Jean Valjean had fallen from one danger upon another. These two encounters, this falling one after the other from Thénardier upon Javert, was a rude shock. Javert did not recognize Jean Valjean, who, as we have stated, no longer looked like himself. He did not unfold his arms. He made sure of his bludgeon in his fist by an imperceptible movement, and said in a curt, calm voice, "Who are you?" "I." "Who is I?" "Jean Valjean." Javert thrust his bludgeon between his teeth, bent his knees, inclined his body, laid his 2 powerful hands on the shoulders of Jean Valjean, which were clamped within them as in a couple of vices, scrutinized him, and recognized him. Their faces almost touched. Javert's look was terrible. Jean Valjean remained inert beneath Javert's grasp, like a lion submitting to the claws of a lynx. "Inspector Javert," said he, "you have me in your power. Moreover, I've regarded myself as your prisoner ever since this morning. I did not give you my address with any intention of escaping from you. Take me. Only grant me one favor." Javert did not appear to hear him. He kept his eyes riveted on Jean Valjean. His chin being contracted, thrust his lips upwards towards his nose, a sign of savage reverie. At length he released Jean Valjean, straightened himself stiffly up without bending, grasped his bludgeon again firmly, and as though in a dream, he murmured rather than uttered this question. "What are you doing here, and who is this man?" He still abstained from addressing Jean Valjean as thou. Jean Valjean replied, and the sound of his voice appeared to rouse Javert. "It is with regard to him that I desire to speak to you. Dispose of me as you see fit, but first help me carry him home. That is all that I ask of you." Javert's face contracted, as was always the case, when anyone seemed to think him capable of making a concession. Nevertheless, he did not say no. Again he bent over, drew from his pocket a handkerchief which he moistened in the water, and with which he then wiped Marius's blood-stained brow. "This man was at the barricade," said he in a low voice, and as though speaking to himself. "He is the one they call Marius." A spy of the first quality, who had observed everything, listened to everything, and taken in everything, even when he thought that he was to die, who had played the spy even in his agony, and who, with his elbows leaning on the first step of the sepulchre, had taken notes. He seized Marius's hand, and felt his pulse. "He is wounded," said Jean Valjean. "He is a dead man," said Javert. Jean Valjean replied, "No, not yet." "So you've brought him thither from the barricade," remarked Javert. His preoccupation must indeed have been very profound for him not to insist on this alarming rescue through the sewer, and for him not to even notice Jean Valjean's silence after his question. Jean Valjean, on his side, seemed to have but one thought. He resumed, "He lives in the Marais, Rue des Filets du Calvaire, with his grandfather. I do not recollect his name." Jean Valjean fumbled in Marius's coat, pulled out his pocketbook, opened it at the page which Marius had penciled, and held it out to Javert. There was still sufficient light to admit of reading. Besides this, Javert possessed in his eye the feline phosphorescence of night birds. He deciphered the few lines written by Marius, and muttered, "Gillenormand, Rue des Filets du Calvaire, No. 6. Then he exclaimed, "Coachman!" The reader will remember that the hackney coach was waiting in case of need. Javert kept Marius's pocketbook. A moment later, the carriage, which had descended by the inclined plane of the watering place, was on the shore. Marius was laid upon the back seat, and Javert seated himself on the front seat beside Jean Valjean. The door slammed, and the carriage drove rapidly away, ascending the quays in the direction of the Bastille. They quitted the quays and entered the streets. The coachman, a black form on his box, whipped up his thin horses. A glacial silence reigned in the carriage. Marius, motionless, with his body resting in the corner, and his head drooping on his breast, his arms hanging, his legs stiff, seemed to be awaiting only a coffin. Jean Valjean seemed made of shadow, and Javert of stone. And in that vehicle full of night, whose interior, every time that it passed in front of a street lantern, appeared to be turned lividly wan, as by an intermittent flash of lightning, chance had united and seemed to be bringing face to face the three forms of tragic immobility: the corpse, the specter, and the statue. Thank you for joining Bite at a Time Books today, while we read a bite of one of your favorite classics. Again, my name is Bree Carlile, and I hope you come back tomorrow for the next bite of Les Miserables.
Don't forget, you can sign up for our newsletter at biteatatimebooks.com. And while you're there, check out our t-shirt shop. You can look in the show notes or on our website, biteatatimebooks.com, for the rest of the links for our show. We'd love to hear from you on social media. You can find us everywhere at Bite at a Time Books.